Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk podcast where we spend just a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just wandering along for the ride.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and you took what I was going to say, Grant.
Oh, well, before we get into any of this craziness, let's talk about how people, it's like the gang's all here, and then we have to go into, it looks like Ted is rubbed off on Grant a little bit. And so
it's going to happen.
Oh, man.
You know, after like 5 years or so, or 3 years, however long. 5 for you guys, 3 for me. It's that, yeah. You know, starts rubbing off a little bit.
There was a Meatloaf song called "You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth." You took the words right out of my mouth. Must have been while you were kissing me. The Card Talk playlist.
Soundtrack, the playlist.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways,
Never.
Right. If there's anybody still listening, there's a lot of ways you can come and interact with the show. I'll put them all up here, over here on the screen, or I will say them. Matt, God bless him for keeping up with what we do here at the pod. We have we have the blog, cardtalk2018.com. If you can't stand what Grant says, then feel free to jump over there, read what Matt says. And Matt probably has a lot of good things that we don't even think about here. He keeps up with us. And then we have Second Breakfast every other week. Micah over on the YouTube channel, he plays some live stream stuff. Sometimes he records it and posts it, but he's in charge of playing. He's our resident play expert. I use that term loosely. And then, no offense, Micah. And then we have email, cardtalk2018@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to support us, help keep the blog alive and kicking, we have, or the blog, everything. You can join us at patreon.com/cardtalk2018. Grant, what's the card?
Well, we're jumping back to the core set, as has been our mantra for the past few weeks, and we are looking at the 2-cost Spirit Ally, the Wandering Took, with 1 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense, 2 hit points, Hobbit Ally, with action, reduce your threat by 3 to give control of Wandering Took to another player, raise that player's threat by 3, limit once per round. With the flavor text, but certainly there was something not entirely Hobbit-like about them. And once in a while, a member of the Took clan would go and have an adventure. The Hobbit.
Yeah, the Took clan. Okay, well, Ted, what do you think?
I love this card because there's only there's a few effects in the game that can cause other players to thread out. This is one of them. And they can do nothing to stop it. It's one of the funnest grief cards in the entire game. Because you're like, your threat looks a little low. No problem. Raise it by 3.
The eternal grief move.
Yeah. So he's fun. He's fun because of that, because he can change ownership, and that's a really neat effect, because sometimes another player having control of the ally bonuses. They might have you might need to be able to, you want to sacrifice him to chump block, or if another character or another player is boosting all of their character's willpower by 1, it makes sense to have that character under their control. So there's a bunch of different effects or reasons for another character to have it. Or if they're short 1 attack, they're like, oh no, I'm short 1 attack. You're like, here, 2 wanders over. Now you have +1 attack. So it's a very neat and surprisingly useful effect.
Grant?
I mean, he's 2 cost for 1 stat across all the board with 2 hit points. In spirit, it's very good. Would I go using his ability every 2 seconds to grief people like Ted? Not really. But at the same time, I have used its ability. And it's come in handy on several occasions. Now, if you have a deck that is dedicated to lowering threat of yourself and your teammates, it works phenomenally well. You put this in and you see you've got Gladrum's Greeting or Elrond's Counsel to reduce your threat, whilst also other people's. It can be very, very beneficial. And like I say, in spirit, you get a lot of willpower boosting, so that helps the Wandering Took as well. And he doesn't really fit into the Hobbit archetype as it is, but he still gets boosted from other Hobbit cards like Hobbit Sense. Sorry, not Hobbit Sense. Like you can attach Hobbit Pipe or Hobbit Pony to him to commit him to the quest after the fact.
Yeah, he'll get the boost from Red Book of Westmarch too.
Yes. So he's decent for the cost of 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a sort of
Hobbit Dave. What is
Or
your
Res-
take on this Hobbit?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is that Hobbit decks typically don't run a ton of Spirit. I mean, there's Spirit Frodo, and there's Spirit Merry and Spirit Pippin, and but I feel like a lot of the Hobbit toys are not in the Spirit sphere, right? Like, I mean, I know Hobbit Pony is and Hobbit Pipe, but
right.
Typically,
Hobbit decks generate off of having low threat, right?
Right.
And Spirit doesn't do anything to reduce threat. What? Or am I?
What?
Continue your thought. I'll remain silent.
What I'm saying, Ted, is that I feel like a lot of the. Let me go this way. In the Black Riders, you basically had a Hobbit deck ready to go in the Black Riders, and nobody took that Spirit Hero Fatty Bulger and started using Fatty Bulger, right? And so, in essence, there's 2 Spirit heroes that are Hobbits in the games, because Spirit Pippin is not worth it and Fatty Bulger is not worth it. So you have, so what I'm saying is the majority of Hobbit stuff doesn't center around having Spirit. So when you're looking for I don't know, when you're looking for Spirit isn't giving you the Hobbit stuff, it's giving you the other things, giving you Test of Will and Shadow Cancellation, because that's what you want. You're not looking for allies to deal with Spirit, you're looking for threat reduction and things like that. So all of this to say, which I'm sure everybody's really confused out there what's going on, because I just went through
we're doing a show about a card.
Here's what I will say. The Wandering Took is a good Spirit ally. It's got 1 stat all the way down. It would be great if it had 2 somewhere and 0 someplace else, but Hobbit, that's not what Hobbits are. And so 2 cost for that stat line as a Hobbit is good, but this doesn't make it into my Hobbit deck because he's not Hobbity. Does it make it into other decks? Sometimes, but he's not. Like he's just a good spirit ally in a limited card pool. I don't think I've ever once triggered his action to lower my threat by 3 to raise somebody else's
that's
3.
a shame. You're missing out. You're missing out. It's super fun.
I can see places where you would do that, but
Yeah, well, the effect of it being an action to instantaneously lower your threat can be really useful, because if you're in the position where you're like, oh no, talking multiplayer or more than one player at least, if you're like, okay, there's an enemy that's going to engage me, and it just because my threat exceeds or matches the enemy's threat rating, if I lower my threat in some fashion, this enemy will not fight me, and you can then trigger that ability to make it someone else's problem. So generally, you are actually planning that out. I'd say I'd never actually triggered the action without gaining permission to the player who is going to be receiving the Wandering Two, because it does impact their threat. But it's helped. I've used it sometimes. There are a couple scenarios where you want to intentionally raise your threat because you're at a point in the game where you want to actually engage a certain enemy that's maybe been lingering in the staging area because it's really high. Exactly. You're like, oh, hey, if I up my threat by 3, because it can be a temporary increase, right? You up your threat by 3 to receive the Wandering Toque. You get that effect or engage that enemy or whatever, and then you can pass it back to that player, and it's the same as you were before. And then vice versa. You can use it to dodge an enemy. So that effect, it can come up, and again, it can surprise you. And even just passing, like I said, the extra attack around or the extra willpower, putting that somewhere else when you have more than one player is strong. And if you're not doing that effect, the fact that he has 2 hit points is certainly helpful, especially in the core set when you have, treacheries dealing damage to exhausted characters, the not so fun Necromancer's Reach, that he won't be killed the first time he goes out. But yeah, David, I get what you're saying about the Hobbit effects. He's not necessarily triggering that kind of stuff, other than maybe keeping your threat low, which does help, I would say.
Right.
But
and to your point, one of the things you have to keep in mind when you are playing multiplayer is that engagements happen in turn order. So if you're player 1 and you have the Wandering Toque, you can pass the Wandering Toque to lower your threat so that you can avoid the engagement and let somebody else engage around the table, player 2 or player 3 or player 4 or whoever, that's,
or someone you just don't like.
Or somebody you don't like.
Right.
Because it's all in turn, you have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that as a reminder to myself, not necessarily that people out there don't know that that's the way it's happening, but if you're early on and your engagement checks happen and you're over by 1 or 2, you can pass the Toque and lower your threat by 3 and give it to somebody else, and then you don't have to worry about it. Let it be somebody else's problem.
Yeah, it doesn't have as impact like solo. I think it definitely has more benefit the more players you have. But 2 players, it's still useful, and solo the ability is nothing. So then you're just simply paying for the stats.
Right, and I think that this is a good ally. Like I just think that 2 cost for those stats. It's good, it's a good ally. Like it could just be, like a soldier of Gondor, like guard of the Citadel. It could just be a 1-1-1-2 ally, and it'd be fine. It's fine. It's good. So, but I don't know.
I don't know. Grant doesn't know. We don't know.
I mean,
we're just talking about cards.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that the card. I don't know. It's not a very overwhelmingly awesome card, but it's a good ally. It's a good ally that doesn't have to go into a Hobbit deck. So,
no, not. I think it can actually see. I think there's still, like I said, value there with the threat reduction, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily lean into it otherwise. But again, it's one of those effects where you're like, oh, okay, in this particular point in the game, it just happens to be very, very helpful, like for this turn, and it can make an impact. And yeah, you might play it and never trigger it. You could also use it to if you're playing with somebody else who has a perilous voyage contract where they are actively trying to that contract you want to see your threat hit a threshold so you can flip and trigger the contract. A lot of players would be like, yeah, okay, great, 3 threat race, bring it here. Like there might be a time where they're actively trying to do that. So it's kind of fun
trying to get
help that
into
player.
valor or something,
Yeah, player. Yeah, so there's other reasons players may want to raise their threat, and you could help them do that. So he's just a helpful toque.
Yep. Well, let's look at the artwork on this guy. Grant, what do you think of the artwork?
I think the artwork's quite fun. It's literally a hobbit there sitting eating an apple and balancing a knife on his finger.
Yeah, it looks very hobbity. Like this is very good hobbit as compared to maybe Shire Folk, which is also a hobbit leaning up against a tree. Like this is just there's a lot of playfulness in here. You can see the big feet, still human like. It's trying to figure out what's in the bag, but
by the looks of it, vegetables.
It's just like fruits and vegetables. Yeah, it's produce.
He's been to Farmer Maggot's field.
Yeah, went down to Produce Junction and got itself some.
What I'd like to say is that the artwork is nice and crisp.
Yeah,
it is.
It's very vibrant.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, because if you look at like the grass, like all the things are like the colors like they should be. Yeah.
Well, should we ring this guy?
Yeah, let's ring him up. He should pay for that produce.
Yeah. Well, it's the Wandering Took. There's not very many cards in the card pool with the word ring in them. So, anyways, for anybody who doesn't know or may have forgotten, or maybe this is your first episode, we have a highly scientific yet arbitrary system where we rank a card on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 ring is the one card to rule them all, or one of the best cards in the game, and 10 rings is the card that we throw back into the fiery chasm from whence it was made, or one of the worst cards in the game. So I think Grant went first last time, so I'll go first this time. Wandering Took, good, not great. Doesn't inspire me to build Hobbit decks. Doesn't really inspire me to use their action. Although I could see the value action in a Valor deck or Perilous Voyage, whatever. Like again, I think that those would be what we call niche-y sort of applications. But I still think it's a good, just out in a limited card pool, 2 cost for a set of stats like that. That's pretty good. So whether you use the action or not. So I think I'm going to have to give this guy a 6. A little bit below average for me, a little bit below the middle, but not bad. So Ted, what do you got?
I was actually, even though I'm more excited about him than you are, I was still going to give him a 6 because his application is a bit fun, and I guess niche is the way because you might not be triggering it all the time, but it is fun to see your cards kind of said multiplayer. It gets passed around the table a bit, and the turn you needed, it pays for itself like 3 times over, which is fun.
It's good. Grant?
Well, I'll agree with what both these users said. It is definitely a niche ability, but just taking it on a 2 cost ally for 1 stat from the core set, and even after that, in spirit, being a hobbit, I'm going to give it a 6 rings.
6s across the board. The 6er.
Ted, you're the resident rules guy. This says reduce your threat by 3 to give control of Wandering Took to another player, right? And so in this game, the word "your" refers to the controller, or does it refer to the person who put that card into play? So, like, can I continue to lower my threat by 3 and pass it to this person, and then this person, and that person, and then this person?
It's a good point, Dave, for some players who might be newer to the game and not understand the distinction, or if you just name as David. And to answer your question, so whenever ownership of a card, in this particular effect, ownership of the card is changing. So if I put Wandering Took into play, the effects always target the whoever is currently controlling it. So I should say it affects the controller, because if it does die, if he's killed, he goes back to the owner's discard pile, no matter where he is, which is something else we should mention. So if I transfer control over to you, David, I lower my threat, you raise yours, and then if you decide to trigger it, since you're the controller of the card, and you want to pass it to Grant, you lower your threat, raise it. I'm removed from the card, except in the case where it, if it were to take damage and be killed, it goes back to the original owner's discard pile of the deck owner card.
Right. Okay. Well, it's a bummer that was the end of the show. So we may have talked about that at the beginning, but well, whatever. Anyways, everybody, we got through the ring rating. We got through the Wandering Took. So join us again next week as we talk about more cards from the game. Have a great day, everybody.
Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube, and there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.